So good morning. I'm Mary Beth Hudson, Executive Director of the Smart Factory Institute in Chattanooga. We are a public-private partnership operated by Peak Performance Incorporated, and we're located at the Volkswagen Academy in Chattanooga. We're part of the Deutsche Messe International Technology Academies, which really focus on connecting technology providers with the manufacturers that will use this key technology to improve their manufacturing operations in the Southeast region. I'd also like to introduce Denise Rice, the CEO of Peak Performance.
Thanks, Mary Beth, and good morning, manufacturers. We are really excited and happy to be coming to you today from the TCAT here in Smyrna, the Nissan Training Center. And we'd like to really thank the Tennessee Manufacturers Association and the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce for really helping us with this series that we're doing. I'm also happy to introduce Dr. Chris Cunningham. So for the folks that are here in the room, you can see that he's pinned here on the screen. For those of you that are joining us by Zoom, you'll be able to see that he is also a speaker for today, and he's coming to us remotely. Dr. Chris Cunningham is the professor from the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, in the Industrial Organizational Psychology Department, master's degree program. And the Smart Factory Institute, located inside the Volkswagen Academy in Chattanooga, has commissioned a report that was completed by Dr. Cunningham and Scott Myers, a graduate student in his program. And so this three-part series that we've been working on has been really explaining the results of that report. So before we get started, though, I am going to ask you, for the folks that are here in person, there is a little card on your table that has the barcodes on it. If you're joining us by Zoom, you can also get your barcodes right from the screen here. Just take your camera on your phone and it will pop up and it'll take you right to the URL. We're asking folks to go ahead and register because it helps us, whether you're a manufacturer or not, it helps us to understand what the industry needs are. Also, all of the slides from all three sessions, as well as the recordings from sessions 1 and 3, will be hosted on this site. So if you guys could do that before we get started, we would really appreciate that. So over the last two series that we had, the first series we were really talking about the impact the Industry 4.0 was having on the industry. And then last week we really focused in on the impact that it was having on the worker. When we're talking about the impact on the industry, we presented to you these 4 pillars, and these are the 4 pillars of Industry 4.0, where we have advanced connectivity, data-driven intelligence, human-machine integration, and advanced production methods. The advanced connectivity is really where you have your IIoT, your smart sensors, the cloud, and the cybersecurity. I like to say this is when Alexa is connected to your Amazon shipments, right? And that is an example of connectivity. Then we have data-driven intelligence. This is where we're using artificial intelligence, machine learning, and big data, and data analytics. And this is when Amazon makes those recommendations for you when you sign on, because based on your data that they've collected, they've analyzed that, and they are predicting what you need. And then we have human-machine integration, which is the augmented virtual reality, collaborative robots, cyber-physical systems, and simulations. And my favorite collaborative robot that we use in our everyday lives is the Roomba, right? That's a little robot that's going around. So that Roomba that you bought on Amazon that they told you that you probably needed is going to show up in human-machine integration. And then the fourth pillar is the advanced production methods. And this is where we're really looking at automation, additive manufacturing or 3D printing, systems integration, and cloud manufacturing. And so these are new techniques and methods that we're using in manufacturing in order to accommodate some of these new technologies. But all these 4 pillars are all surrounding the smart worker and the smart manager, which is at the core of this technology changes. So regardless of how much technology we're talking about, what it really comes down to is if we don't have the people that have the skills in order to operate this technology, we're not going to be able to enable the technology changes that we need. Dr. Cunningham, did you want to comment on this?
I think the summary you've provided is a good one, Denise, and I think that's just the other real important point to highlight is the one you just alluded to, is that the technology is great, but if we don't have users who know how to leverage it, and if we don't have managers who know how to manage it, and if we don't have an organization that broadly enough can support it long term, then the return on investment in those investments just won't be as high as it could be. And I know that's part of our focus today.
Thank you. So as we start looking at the impact on the industry, we have to look at over the last 20 years, and that dark blue line is going to be manufacturing output. And you can see how manufacturing output has increased over time. The royal blue line is headcount in manufacturing, and you can see how over time there's been a general decrease. So as we predict and look out into the future, we expect that manufacturing output is going to increase by over 16%, yet headcount is going to decrease by 3.5%. And so if you're a manufacturer, you know that we have had, are having, and will continue to have a labor gap in manufacturing. And I probably didn't need to put this graph up there to tell you that if you're in manufacturing, but this is just some data to show you how that exists. One other thing to notice, though, too, is as headcount's coming down, we're seeing that manufacturers are becoming more and more efficient in their production, and they need to. And as we talk about this shortage of the qualified worker, there's really two-prong approach to this. The first one is the emergent worker. These are your people who are entering into the workforce. And the problem that we have here with the emergent worker is that there's not a lot of interest in manufacturing and not a lot of motivation to enter manufacturing-related positions. A lot of this is a branding issue that we have ourselves because we have not branded manufacturing as an exciting and new career. And Industry 4.0 can help us with that rebranding and changing those images. The second part is the incumbent worker. So that is the worker that already exists. There's over 12 million incumbent workers in the United States. And what is really important, the problem here is making sure that they are upskilling and reskilling in order to be able to keep up with the changing technologies. And so the critical worker requirements are going to be different for tomorrow than what they were for yesterday because of the impact of Industry 4.0. So today we're really focused on the industry at the organizational level. So we've talked about it at the Industry 4.0 at the industry level for all of manufacturing. Last week we spent a lot of time talking about it for the worker. Today we're going to talk about it for the individual manufacturing company and how can they be successful in implementing their success. So there's really three areas. The first one is the future work requirements. We spent a lot of time about that last week. I'll review that in just a second. The second one is going to be a change management strategy that the organization needs to adopt. And then the last one will be the talent management considerations and what considerations does an organization need to make. So just a review from last week, when we were talking about the critical workforce requirement models, there's 4 areas in which future work requirements are going to be focused on. Of course, technical, which is no surprise, and that is the largest one that's going to require increase and upskilling for those. And when we're talking about technical, we're talking about the ability to understand, use, and interact with various Industry 4.0 technologies, things such as data science, advanced analytics, and IT. The second one is methodological, and these are systems and business perspectives. These are going to be skills such as problem solving, analytical skills, and research skills. Then we have social, which is the ability to communicate and work well with others. These would be skills such as leadership capabilities, awareness of the human side of work, and collaboration, which was actually really surprising to me coming out of this report because as we've been talking about technology, what we've seen is the social skills, the increase in the requirements of the social skills. And then the fourth area is the intrapersonal, and this is workers' values, their motivations, and their attitudes. And one of the biggest things in this area will be that continuous learning and knowledge transfer. So wanting to really understand or to buy into the fact that a career in manufacturing is going to be a career of lifelong learning because the technologies are going to continue to change and change. The other thing that we talked about under interpersonal last week was really the flexibility and ability to work under pressure because of the breadth of how the responsibilities for the worker is changing. Dr. Cunningham, I'm going to switch that over to you.
Yeah, no, I think that summary was really good and definitely encourage people attending today to take a listen to last week's presentation if they weren't able to attend. I think one of the just big high level takeaways here is that there's a tendency to get wrapped up with the technology when we talk about Industry 4.0. And one of the big points that we need to emphasize is that the technology alone is not going to solve these issues or solve these problems. And in fact, if you only focus on the technology, you're likely to create additional problems for your organization. So what Denise has just outlined is a broader framework of critical requirements, competencies, knowledge, skill, ability elements that we're going to need to either develop in our existing folks or find and locate and train in the emerging workforce that she was talking about earlier.
All right, thank you. I would like to welcome Mary Beth Hudson up to the stage. She is now going to take us through the change management strategy and the talent management considerations.
Thank you, Denise. So, one of the things that we have learned and discussed is that Industry 4.0 really connects all aspects of an organization, everything from your raw material and operating supplies all the way through production, sales, all the way through to distribution and delivery at the customer. And because of that interconnectedness, all aspects of the organization are impacted by Industry 4.0. It's not just the manufacturing organization. That being said, that means that a lot of attention and care and consideration needs to be made for a formal change management process. It's not just about training the production workers on how to interface with this new technology. It's really training the entire organization on how to successfully implement this new Industry 4.0 technology. It impacts everything, and it's absolutely critical that to begin with, there needs to be a clear message of why you're making this change. It can't just be because it's new, cool technology. Another thing that needs to be considered is the ability to physically implement this new technology in the manufacturing operations. You should perform an Industry 4.0 self-check to make sure that you're ready and identify any gaps that you might have in your plans. Engaging workers in the process is very important. Also important is having support from upper level management. A lot of times you're going to encounter challenges and problems, and you're going to need that support. You may need some additional resources to help with that implementation. And then also, you can't forget a plan to retain your skilled workers, your talent that you already have that you've invested in. That's also very, very critical. So, one of the best ways to engage a workforce and retain that skilled talent that you've already invested in is through training. However, when manufacturers were surveyed, 75% reported not having structured training programs for manufacturing skills, and 76% reported that organizational training offerings aren't adequate to meet future demands. That's a big gap. And that's one of the ways that Peak Performance can help with the training. Peak Performance Workforce Training Center provides employees with engaging online learning content delivered to any device. The cloud-based solution gives your employees access to a variety of safety, harassment, leadership, and industrial skills training delivered on their devices at their schedule whenever they need. The individual training programs can be provided for your employees. You can upload your own content as well as use the content that's already there. Again, it's compatible with all types of mobile devices. We have options for courses that are in English and in Spanish. We can also provide instructor-led training with industrial manufacturing experienced trainers. So please check out the Peak Workforce Training Center. Excuse me. So keeping workers engaged through training helps build and sustain an agile, flexible workforce that's needed to be able to implement these Industry 4.0 changes. Organizations must create talent management programs that balance worker competencies and the ever-changing industry needs. The learning and competency engagement systems include formal reviews, self-assessments, interviews, observations, surveys, testings. Those are all standard ways to evaluate competencies. But also, these will be used to develop individual training plans with abilities to create the training that's necessary for each individual worker to be able to interface with this new technology. This will, again, help keep workers motivated through the change process. It's incredibly important to keep workers motivated so that you don't lose that knowledge and skills for your existing operations as you're going through this change. Beyond managing the massive changes of Industry 4.0, traditional talent management is also likely to change as industry technologies change. Overall, talent training and development under Industry 4.0 will have a lot of technological advancements. There are a lot of variety content delivery platforms and training formats that are likely to change. The exact contents of the programs will need to evolve along with the manufacturing technologies and ways of working. And trainings must not only be reactive to the industry shifts, but also we need to predict what those future changes will be, because the training now will be continuous with the workers. Overall, the full benefits of Industry 4.0 will only be achieved if your workers are engaged and if they're continuing to work on their skills development. Dr. Cunningham, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I mean, you've covered a lot of good ground here, and I think just a couple of high-level things to highlight and emphasize. One point that was mentioned a couple minutes back is how important it is to have a clear message for change. And when we're dealing with especially the existing workforce and wanting to retain them and be able to benefit from their expertise and their skills and their knowledge, we have to understand that the message for change can't just be that the technology exists and that we have to do it to be competitive. That's certainly part of why a lot of organizations are going to adopt Industry 4.0 technology. But another part of the message has to make it clear that the goal is not to necessarily replace the people that we have with this technology. Because if it's not said, then it might be implied and it might be assumed. And that's one of the dangerous things right now. We talked a little bit about this last week, about the idea of automation anxiety and about the fears that many workers have that they're going to be made obsolete by a lot of this new technology. And what we're trying to get across is that that's not necessarily the case. What we need to also explain to folks is that their ability to stay productive and to continue on as a value-adding contributor to the organization is going to require a shift in mindset. And for a lot of folks, this is kind of scary. And so another part of the change process that needs to be carefully managed is helping individuals see that it is possible to learn new skills. And there's a reason that you might want to do this to keep the job more challenging, more engaging, more fun. Part of this that we also touched on briefly, but haven't spoken a lot about, is that there may need to be some shifting in how we go about incentivizing and rewarding training. Instead of it just being an optional thing that you do if you're interested, this may need to really be factored into development plans that are part of people's yearly sort of management goals and objectives. So there are a lot of nitty gritty details here, and obviously this will vary by your particular organizational setup and the population you're working with. But I just want to stress again that what we're trying to highlight here is a need to not neglect the management of talent and get all wrapped up in the integration of new technology.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, again, organizations must create talent management programs that balance the worker competencies and the ever-changing industry needs. So the main reason, like Dr. Cunningham just said, you can't or you shouldn't just implement new technology just because it's cool new technology. The main reason manufacturers will implement new technology is to get a positive return on investment. All manufacturers are very familiar with the return on investments associated with the direct or tangible cost savings for the equipment installations. Things like downtime reduction, things like increased utilization, increased output, energy efficiency, even labor productivity are standard ways that manufacturers use to justify the expense of installing new equipment in their operations. Another aspect that has largely been overlooked in the past has been more the softer, intangible impact that's positive with implementing these new technologies. And we talked a little bit in previous sessions about some of the benefits associated with installing Industry 4.0 technologies, things that will improve the worker attitudes, the motivation, the engagement, even improve retention. Those aspects have traditionally been harder to quantify, and typically manufacturers will overlook them when they're trying to justify an expense. But with Industry 4.0, those are very, very important. Another thing to mention is that if industries do nothing, if manufacturers choose not to implement technology, the net impact is not zero. The net impact is actually negative. There is a negative cost associated with doing nothing and trying to maintain the status quo. Dr. Cunningham?
Yeah, no, that's well said. And just to kind of maybe even underscore that last point a little more strongly, we mentioned this last week, and it is also discussed in the report. But choosing not to adopt Industry 4.0 may, in some cases, mean choosing to fold as a business in the near future, because especially for the smaller to medium-sized organizations that are part of larger supply chains, if they can't keep up with the demands of the larger organizations that are adopting this technology in a big way, then they'll be cut loose, because these systems, these chains will only operate as fast and as quickly and as well as the weakest link. And this is one of those kind of break moments where organizations will be challenged. Now, on the other hand, it's not the case that every organization is going to need to adopt every Industry 4.0 technology, nor could they. I mean, they don't have the resources to do that. And so part of what Mary Beth's been alluding to here is there's a need to understand what your capacity as an organization is, and also to think through really carefully, where are the places in our process where adopting some of this technology could be really beneficial? What level of adoption and investment can we handle? And also, what kinds of technologies can our existing workforce actually adapt to support? Maybe you're blessed with access to a lot of new talent. Maybe you've got a great partnership with some training programs that are pumping out some really solid graduates, and you realize you're on the cusp of being able to adopt some of the most cutting edge, high technology solutions. Maybe not. Maybe you're an organization where you've got a long-term workforce and they're very dedicated and they want to stick around, but you're not going to turn them into programmers overnight. So you need to think about technologies you can adopt that might be a little more interactive and something that they can touch and feel and see and understand that way. So these are the types of considerations that you're likely to have. And this is the kind of thing that the Smart Factory Institute can help out with.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Another less tangible and more difficult to calculate or quantify benefit of Industry 4.0 is associated with better usage of information and data. This chart shows an example of a global survey by PwC that shows that over 900 billion in annual investments in Industry 4.0 technology will yield an almost $500 billion digital revenue gains for companies associated with implementing this technology. So this is extra revenue or sales that they achieve by implementing that technology. Also, $421 billion in hard cost savings. So these are actual operating cost savings that are estimated to be saved. There's another example of this type of savings that's really dramatic. ABI researchers estimate that over $1 trillion in overall production value will be gained by 2030 with enterprise 5G solutions installed in manufacturing locations instead of the traditional Wi-Fi. So the enterprise 5G solutions are basically a contained cellular network inside a manufacturing location. It allows for the implementation of autonomous robots, of artificial intelligence, of condition-based monitoring of equipment, and so forth. And these interconnected technologies that are enabled by being able to have that enclosed cellular network, estimates are that you would achieve a cost savings of over 8.5% and have an overall return on investment in the neighborhood of 10 to 20%, which is absolutely phenomenal. Now, not all cases would you expect to achieve such high returns, but these are just a couple of examples of the magnitude of the impact of the new technology. Do you want to add anything, Dr. Cunningham?
Well, I just highlight that last example there about the sort of upgrading to a cellular infrastructure is an example of the kind of technology implementation that's not terribly, sexy or exciting. I mean, you're not going to see it, you're not going to be able to manipulate it, but what it makes possible is a very robust and effective Internet of Things infrastructure, like we had alluded to earlier, and that's what makes a lot of these other technologies possible. So, I think the other point that example highlights is that in addition to just buying and implementing the technology that might actually manipulate or assemble the parts that you're interested in producing, you're going to need some infrastructure investment as well. And this is that other part of technological investment. And any of you that have tried to do this have realized that it's never as simple as just one piece. There's usually a few pieces that have to be put in place to get optimal benefit. One of the other points we're trying to emphasize is as you think about those various pieces that have to be implemented and maintained, let's not forget that one of those big pieces are the workers and also the managers that have to interact with those systems.
That's a good segue into the next slide, talking about the impact of the return on investment for the skilled workforce. So we talked earlier about it's challenging to try to calculate what is the impact of having an engaged skilled workforce and how do you include that in your ROI calculation. Increased recruitment and retention strategies are absolutely justified. So you'll have to invest in trying to make sure you actively try to retain your workforce, but it's super important because there's a negative impact to productivity, knowledge loss, and workers' attitudes and motivation when you start losing your workforce. This slide shows you some of the statistics associated with turnover. And if you look at the numbers in the map of Tennessee, at a 44% average turnover, a conservative impact to Tennessee manufacturing organizations based only on using 20% of their annual salary in the calculation of turnover costs yields a $2 billion estimated impact in the cost of turnover. And this is one main reason why it is absolutely necessary to invest in your workforce. Another point to make is that high impact learning organizations outperform other organizations. They have 37% greater productivity, they are 58% more likely to have skills to meet future demands. They're 33% more likely to be first to the market, and 17% more likely to be market share leaders. Dr. Cunningham?
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of details here, and I do want to stress for those that might be listening to this or reading these slides in the future, the statistics on this slide represent a number of various data points that are worth noting, but I will also try to make it clear that the information on the left side and the information on the state graphic here aren't necessarily linked. These are two different sets of estimates, so just try not to be confused by that. In the report itself, it's all laid out in a real narrative fashion, and hopefully it makes sense there. And the real big kind of takeaway here is, and this goes back to a point Mary Beth made earlier, this is one of those places where a lot of organizations are suffering a cost of inaction. Many organizations up till recently have been feeling pretty okay with a turnover rate that might be in that 30 to 40% realm. They don't love it, but they know that it is, their perspective is basically, it is what it is. And, we're going to fill these roles as necessary. But what is not often figured out is that not filling those roles costs money, filling those roles costs money, training those people up to where they can be productive costs money. And let's not even get started on how damaging that is to building a sustainable workforce that is adaptive, robust, can be resilient, because you don't have institutional knowledge in connection with that organization that goes deep. So there's a lot of ripple effects here that add and add and add to these costs. And so when Mary Beth says this is conservative, I can tell you that if we use certain other parameters that have been recommended by other scholars in this area, this estimate could even come close to doubling. And that's just for 1 year. Okay, so that gives you some idea of what's on the table, so to speak, if we wanted to get serious about these issues.
Thank you. So the return on investment for the smart workforce, there are estimates that the soft skill return on investment is in the neighborhood of 125% to 150%. So that's huge. And that's one of the reasons why it's really important to include that in your ROI calculations when you're justifying investment in this new Industry 4.0 technology. It's important to identify key performance indicators relevant to the firm, such as product quality, machine availability, production efficiency, energy consumption. Those, again, are the traditional factors that are considered when calculating a return on investment for any kind of investment in manufacturing. But it's also important to consider how Industry 4.0 will impact the workforce and improve the employee experience, such as the worker attitudes, absenteeism, turnover, and other behaviors. One thing that you should do is identify weakness areas in production systems and processes where inefficiency and lost costs occur, such as in recruitment or in training programs. KPIs need to be evaluated and measured both before and after implementation of Industry 4.0 technologies and systems. And also, it's recommended, because you may not have a lot of data already. So instead of waiting a year or multiple years, it's recommended using short periods of time, around 100 days, to measure the effects of changes in these specific weakness areas. Dr. Cunningham?
Yeah, and that time frame, will vary on what you're implementing. I mean, let's also acknowledge that if you're putting in place a very advanced new production system or process, it might take at least 100 days for your workforce to get used to it. So you're going to want to monitor how they develop over that time, and then probably track that performance out over another few months at least, just to show that it's holding steady. I also just want to underscore a point that Mary Beth made a few seconds ago, is that it's very easy to fixate on ROI only in terms of dollar values, and I know that that is a normal way that we try to calculate and demonstrate it. But when we talk about impacts of Industry 4.0, focusing on this idea of how it affects the employee experience is also something we can't neglect. Let's be honest. I mean, a lot of the jobs that we have in our facilities can tend to be a little bit monotonous, tedious, maybe even unsafe at times. And you can imagine how it might actually benefit workers when we're able to offer a new technology, a new tool, a new process that actually keeps them safer, or breaks up the monotony, or adds a new piece of critical thinking and challenge to the job. These are sort of intangible, and it's going to be rather difficult to assign a dollar value, but it's not going to be difficult to show and demonstrate that workers are responding positively to this, with improvements in their job satisfaction, their engagement, their commitment to the organization, and other metrics like this. So I just want to encourage you to think broadly about other metrics that you might be interested in gathering here as your organization gets ready to implement.
Very good. Yeah, and again, you need to gather data before, during, and after implementation of the new technology or training to provide the accurate impact of the effect. Biz Library provides a simple ORI formula for analyzing and measuring ROI of training programs and other workforce investments, and you see the calculations here on this slide. By estimating the net program benefits, dividing by net program cost, and multiplying by 100, you can calculate an ROI on these otherwise challenging metrics to quantify. So we talked about this cost of inaction a little bit earlier. And adoption and implementation of Industry 4.0 technologies can all be recouped. All of the cost can be recovered, and then an actual positive return on investment can occur. But it's very damaging if Industry 4.0 is not adopted. Inaction and failure to innovate in production, in products, in technology leads to a lost opportunity. Dr. Cunningham, would you want to add any more?
Well, and then in this day and age too, it also is going to make it harder and harder for your organization to stay in business, period. I mean, the other thing we've been talking about, right, is how important it's going to be to tap into talent wherever it is, and to recruit not only the new emerging talent, but to retain your existing talent. Well, this is going to be one of those moments where organizations that take no action will be left behind. The new talent's going to go where it's exciting, where it's engaging, where it's investment. The existing talent that's interested in developing their career long-term may do likewise. So it's not just an issue of not being able to keep up with production. It's going to be an issue of being able to keep your staffing healthy and keep the organization vibrant. So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, thank you. So the Industry 4.0 changes and improvements are going to only be as strong as the weakest links in the chain. All connected organizations must adopt Industry 4.0 technology to be successful. And when I talk about all connected organizations, I'm not just talking about within the same company, but also within the network of suppliers and manufacturers and end customers. Everyone needs to be able to adopt Industry 4.0. This becomes pretty critical, especially when you think about some of the manufacturers, the larger manufacturers that are closer to the end of the supply chain. It's going to be easier for them to adopt Industry 4.0 because they typically have the resources available. But the smaller manufacturers that are at the front end of the supply chain also need to adopt Industry 4.0. And this is where it really gets challenging, because over 90% of manufacturers in Tennessee have less than 100 employees total. They often don't have the resources to be able to invest in research and develop these plans to implement this new technology. So it's going to be even more important for those smaller companies to reach out and get support to implement Industry 4.0. Dr. Cunningham?
Yeah, and that support could take a lot of forms. I mean, one of the things we talked about today that is a challenge for a lot of smaller organizations is being able to offer training and development that'll keep pace as the technology evolves. And that's where many organizations may need to partner with outside entities like Smart Factory Institute and other groups to have access to that training. It may also be the case that suppliers are going to have to explore some different models for making technology available to these smaller organizations. Instead of flat out purchase contracts, for example, there may be opportunities for rental or loan type situations to get training and skilled users in these systems, because the data that generates actually ends up being valuable to the vendor of the equipment in the first place. So there's a lot of new models coming, to the forefront here, and it's going to be the kind of thing where it's really important for all organizations to stay tuned and to be listening for advancements as these different strategies for making Industry 4.0 possible come on board.
Thank you. And that's where the Smart Factory Institute can also help. The Smart Factory Institute, again, is there to help connect manufacturers with these technology providers. We have a variety of conferences, workshops, events, bringing in manufacturers, as well as we have partnerships with technology providers that will showcase their technology at the Smart Factory Institute inside the Volkswagen Academy 365 days a year. And manufacturers will be able to see, feel, touch, see the operation of this technology and come up with the ideas to help develop their Industry 4.0 roadmaps. So, Industry 4.0 transforms the entire manufacturing industry. And smart technology is typically in the spotlight. That's what people think about when they think about Industry 4.0. But the worker is central to making sure that Industry 4.0 is successful. We will have new, efficient, connected, data-driven ways of working, complex, strategic types of work, new work requirements. We'll have a culture of adaptability and innovation and continuous change. We'll have to have new talent management considerations to prepare, and we also will need to try to rebrand manufacturing as a desirable work that people will want to enter into. So we need to make sure that to fill the skills gap that we're reaching not just the traditional manufacturing worker, but that everyone understands that the nature of work has changed and manufacturing offers very challenging, very rewarding careers in the future. Dr. Cunningham?
Yeah, I just think it's really important to highlight that last point. And I know sometimes when we're summarizing a report like this, the overall message coming forward might sound kind of negative, like change is coming, the end is near. That's not the point that we really want to highlight. The point we want to highlight is that this is a truly exciting time for the manufacturing industry. And when there is proper attention and investment given to the opportunities that are out there, this is a revolutionary moment. And it can change not only the ability of organizations to do their job well and actually meet end user needs, but it can also completely transform the work experience, not just for the worker, but for the managers of those workers, and even to the point of adjusting the cultures of manufacturing organizations. So hopefully you guys can pick up a little bit on the positive reality here that this creates, is that this is one of those shakeup opportunities, and it's been needed in a lot of areas, and it's a really amazing time to be leading a manufacturing organization and thinking about what's possible going forward.
Thank you. So, one of the key messages that we have had throughout this series of presentations is that manufacturing is evolving. And we talked a lot about Industry 4.0, but Industry 4.0 is not the end. Manufacturing will continue to evolve. There's already been discussion about Industry 5.0. Another area that needs to be explored a little bit further is the relationship between Industry 4.0 technology and lean manufacturing processes. So there's a lot more work to be done and a lot of continuous change and improvement. Dr. Cunningham?
Yeah, I mean, that's very well said. And I would say too, try not to get too worried about, if we're too slow getting in Industry 4.0, maybe we should just wait and skip to Industry 5.0. I do want to stress that the projections right now in Industry 5.0 is it's just going to be a little upgrade over this one. This is the bigger one. This is the phase that we want to focus on. When we get to that next stage, what hopefully will be possible is a realization of gains from investment in Industry 4.0 technology and workforce training. And of course, you can't get there unless you go over this bridge. So that's one point I'd just like to highlight.
All right, thank you. I think we have a few questions.
Yeah, so Dr. Cunningham and Mary Beth, I just wanted to start off. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. The first one is regarding around the efficiency gains that we're touting, but at the same time, we're also saying that we need to ensure our employees that they will not be laid off or lose their jobs. So as we see the efficiency gains, how do I assure my employees that they're not going to be laid off?
Yeah, I think that we have talked about that in some of the previous sessions, that Industry 4.0 is not a job killer. Industry 4.0 is a job changer. Jobs evolve and change, and actually new jobs are created. The jobs that are created are more focused on the complex, strategic, more problem-solving type of skills instead of the physical and routine and task-oriented skills. Dr. Cunningham?
Yeah, that's very true. One other angle that you might want to explore here with folks that question this or have these concerns is the reality that if we don't make efficiency gains, your jobs are at direct risk. And so that's a super important point we sometimes have to get across, is that it might be painful to think about having to train up or upskill. It might be painful to think about having to do things a little differently than we've done them before. But is that more painful than, losing the job totally? Probably not, for most people. And knowing that the organization is thinking about you and wanting to keep you employed and want to keep you engaged, that's also a chance for you as an organizational leader to convey to your workforce that we're investing in you. Really, that's what we're doing. We're trying to make sure that you stay employed and that this community stays engaged in this process of manufacturing. So that would be another angle that you could explore.
Okay, great. We also have another question, and that is the ROI calculations have been very helpful as we are trying to build our technology roadmap. Are there other resources that you would point us to?
There are so many out there. And so I know Mary Beth highlighted the Biz Library is one particular website that has a wealth of resources with kind of guides. And they don't own ROI calculations by any means. I mean, there are some institutes out there that focus on human capital metrics. There's some fantastic publications by scholars like Jack Fitzentz and others who have specialized in human capital metrics over the years. But really, generating ROI estimates is not rocket science. And one of the most important tips, or I guess tricks I would stress, is it's really critical that however you decide to calculate these, you do it in a transparent way. And you make all of the assumptions or elements in your calculations known so that people who look at these calculations can see for themselves if it makes sense. The other strategy that seems to help out a lot when you're trying to get other stakeholders on board and have them believe these estimates is to do what we call a sensitivity analysis. Do a lower end and a higher end estimate, help them see the range of potential impact. sometimes that is a lot more influential than doing or generating what we would call a point estimate, single value. It's really hard to believe a single value, but it's a lot easier to have confidence that the impact is going to be between this end and that end of the spectrum. So there are some more details on these types of things in the report toward the end of the report, and I definitely encourage people to take a look at that.
good.
Okay, yep, thank you. And I think as for additional resources, Mary Beth is going to cover that as far as the manufacturer circle at the Smart Factory here in just a moment.
Yeah, so thank you for the questions. And again, I mentioned that one of the ways that the Smart Factory Institute can help manufacturers connect to technology providers is through our series of events and workshops. This is a listing of our signature events that we have planned for 2022. And I would encourage everyone to go to peakperformanceinc.com, look at the events, especially register for the upcoming Robotics Congress. That's just in a couple of weeks on March 3rd. You can register virtually, and we have a great lineup of technology providers that will talk about options that are available and considerations that you will make in installing robotic equipment in your operations. We're going to follow that in April by an EV battery conference. We have an expo in August at the VW Convention Center. And then we have in September a 5G conference talking about some of those enterprise solutions that I mentioned earlier. We have an electronics conference in November, and then we are continuing the evaluation of the impact of Industry 4.0 on the workforce, and Dr. Cunningham and his team are currently diving into it a little deeper, and that will be the focus of our December workforce conference. Also, to help manufacturers, we have a manufacturer circle available, and you can purchase individual or group packages for this manufacturer circle. It includes tickets to all of our signature events, an in-person industrial automation assessment. So someone will come into your manufacturing location and spend a day, help you identify opportunities to implement new technology to improve your operations. It also provides access to our online Peak Workforce Training Center that I talked about earlier, and it includes registrations for online MESA International Smart Manufacturing Training courses. So again, this is a great way, especially for those small, medium-sized manufacturers that need support in developing and implementing their Industry 4.0 roadmaps, to use the resources at the Smart Factory Institute to help you on your journey. And with that, are there any other questions? If not, I would like to thank you all for joining us. And as Denise said, you can go to our website. You can get the slides from the previous 2 sessions as well as today's sessions, and also get the recordings of session 1 and today's session, and download the report. I thank you, Dr. Cunningham, for joining us, and thank you, Denise. Thank you to Smyrna TCAT for allowing us to be here today, and the Tennessee Manufacturers Association for supporting us, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day.